First, I will introduce you to Dr. Fabian Sommerach, who is Deputy Secretary General and Head of Insight at the Geneva Association, who is also editor of the report. And then we'll move on to a presentation from Professor Martin Ehling, who's Director of the Institute of Insurance Economics at the University of St. Gallen, who co-authored the paper with Dr. Werner Schnell, also of the University of St. Gallen. I now hand over to Dr. Fabian Sommerach.
Yeah, good afternoon also from my side. I just want to give you some background information why we have done this report, because before we go into the details of the report. So cyber for us is definitely one of the top emerging risks in a more digitally connected world for societies, but also for the economy. And for the insurance industry, most of you are aware of that, cyber risks represent a tremendous new market with a lot of growth opportunities. However, currently cyber risks are creating a number of challenges to the insurability due to a lack of data, but also modeling issues, and for example, also because of accumulation risk. So the GA has set up in 2016 a new research program on cyber and innovation to foster research in this field. And this stock-taking report on cyber risk and cyber risk insurance we are discussing, or which we will discuss today with you, is our first report in this area. It provides insights into the current level of understanding about cyber risk and also include initial recommendation about potential roles the insurance industry could play, but also governments could play, and also the academic world. So we see this report as input for the stakeholder discussion on a global level. And in the upcoming 30 to 40 minutes, we'll provide you more key insights of this report, and would also like to encourage you, with all your experience, to share some thoughts on this issue. Let me hand over to Martin Ehling to start with the presentation, and thanks a lot again for all your participation today. Martin, up to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Fabian, for the nice introduction. Thanks also to Anthony for the introduction. It's a pleasure for me, of course, to do this webinar. And so maybe the first thing that I want to mention here is that on Wednesday, Yahoo announced the biggest email data breach ever, with more than 1 billion users affected. And dear ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how you feel about the development of the internet today, but for me, it really feels like the Wild West of the 21st century. A room widely without any laws, where companies as well as individuals are more or less helpless, exposed to risks. And for this reason, it's also not surprising to see that the criminals that companies are afraid of today, they do not come mass through the entrance door, but they come secretly via the computer. It's a topic that people typically don't like to talk about, but where every firm is heavily working on. And there's a current study for Germany which says that more than 90% of all companies have been victims of hacking attacks this year. So what is the proper risk management strategy in response to such risks, and what is the role of insurance as part of a proper risk management strategy? It's a pleasure for me to discuss 10 key questions on cyber risk and cyber insurance today with. Let me maybe start the presentation with a short management summary. And on the management summary, I also try to provide some additional motivation for what we do. So what you see here is an article copied from the Financial Times from February this year. And if you just read the quote here, cyber risk too big to cover. And if you look a little here into the details, you will find a quote by Steve Catlin, who is one of the prominent market participants in this context. And he says that this is the biggest, most systemic risk that has ever came up into his 42-year insurance career. So this is quite some statement and quite some good motivation for us to consider this important but also difficult topic. So let's look what we did exactly in our paper. So what we try to provide is an overview on the main research topics in the field of cyber risk and cyber risk insurance based on a data set of 211 papers. So what we do is we have scanned through the literature from the year 2000 to 2016, 4 papers on cyber risk and cyber risk insurance with a focus on business and economics. And we came up with a list of these 200 papers and then provide a structured review of those 200 papers. However, we do not only look into the past, we also try to look a little into the future. That is, we also illustrate future research directions, and we do this both from a practical, applied point of view, as well as from an academic perspective. Okay, maybe a quick look also at some of the results. You will not be surprised to hear that there are significant difficulties in ensuring cyber risk, especially due to the lack of data, the lack of modeling approaches, the risk of change, and the risk accumulation. But also here, we do not only talk about problems, we also try to talk a little about the potential solutions. So we also discuss various ways to overcome these insurability limitations. And few examples are mentioned here: the mandatory reporting requirements, the pooling of data, or also the topic of public-private partnerships. Let me briefly mention also here the collaboration with the Geneva Association, because the quality of the report is definitely an outcome of the intense collaboration that we had with various member companies of the Geneva Association. And I've seen in the attendance list today that also many of those people are here online today. So a big thanks to everybody that has contributed to this study. Okay, so let's start. And as I said, I will start with a little motivation. And the first piece that I have here, Anthony mentioned that we have prepared two polls as a little motivating example. And the first question that I would like to ask to the audience today is, how likely do you consider an internet failure throughout Switzerland lasting several days in the next 5 years? And if we maybe just look at the question here, you see, so we talk about Switzerland, so it's a regionally limited internet failure, which lasts more than 24 hours, and I asked for the probability within the next 5 years, so it's not 12 months, so not short term, but it's also not extremely far away. I'm very interested to hearing your thoughts on this. So how likely do you consider an internet failure throughout Switzerland lasting more than 24 hours in the next 5 years? And the evaluation is done on a scale from 0 to 1, 0% to 100%. And maybe we just wait for a few seconds so that everybody can click his. I also pick one. And then I ask Anthony maybe to go over and let's have a look at the results. So Anthony, is it possible to show the results? Just wait for a second. Oh, here we have it. All right, so it's quite a mix, right? So we have a few people that find it rather unlikely, only 0%. Nobody believes it's 100%. But in between, we have a mix, the majority with 20%, but then 23% for both 40 and 60%. And the nice thing about this question is that I can now also provide you a little benchmarking on the results of this questionnaire, because it's a question that we also ask regularly in different contexts. And here you see a few benchmarks that I can provide. So in another study that we did with Swiss Re, we asked the same question to cyber insurance experts in Switzerland and got a value of 42%. And just recently I did a workshop with board members of small and medium enterprises here in Switzerland and also asked the same question. And they came up with an average value of 38%. And if I just go back to the results of our little questionnaire here, then I believe the average would also be somewhere in the area of 40%. So it seems to be a scenario which is rather likely than unlikely. And if you would consider such a scenario in context of a risk map, that definitely is something that we need to look at. Okay, so let me come to the research itself, and as we already indicated, this research is organized in different research clusters consisting of 10 key questions. And the first thing that we provide in the first 7 questions is a summary of the existing knowledge on cyber risk and cyber insurance. So here we scan through the 211 papers and try to pull out what are the main research topics which are discussed in those papers. And then building upon that, we look into the future and talk about potential future work, both from the practical as well as from the academic perspective. And if we just have a quick glance at the 10 questions, we begin with the very basic thing. So what is cyber risk? And you will all be aware that this is really a pool for very different kinds of risks that can happen. So I think in the first step, it's very important to have a clear definition and categorization of cyber risks. Then we talk about costs and detrimental effects caused by cyber risks. Then the questions 3 and 4 here, those are the pieces which are maybe most relevant for insurance companies as they now start developing cyber insurance policies. So where do we find data on potential cyber losses, and how can we model those losses? Then we have 2 questions from the micro and macro perspective. So micro perspective, how should cyber risk management be organized? And this is a topic where I would say which is quite well explored. And macro perspective, also very interesting, is cyber risk a threat to the global economy and society? And last but not least, building upon the results of the first 6 questions, we talk about cyber insurance. So the cyber insurance market, what is the status quo and what are the insurability challenges based on the outcomes of the first 6 questions. And then, as I said, we look at the practical perspective and the academic perspective into the future. So what should the insurance industry do to prevent cyber risk and to support cyber insurance? Same question with respect to the government. So what should the governments do to prevent cyber risk and to support cyber insurance? And then last but not least, and I believe this is really important also for the development of the topics, that more academic research is done on this topic. So what are future research directions on the area of cyber risk and cyber insurance? I have prepared just one short slide on the methodology where I just provide some descriptive statistics that you also find in the study. So we have this structured review process that we have used also in other review papers. And the thing that I maybe want to highlight here is just the picture here. You can see this explosive growth of contributions to cyber risk and cyber risk insurance in recent years. So we scanned through the literature from 2000 to 2016, and you can see that since 2008, 2009, there really is an exponential growth in the number of papers on the topic. If you look at 2016 here, it's reduced, but that's just due because we started this research at the beginning of the year and then made a cut somewhere in May. So if you would do the same exercise again, maybe next year, you will find definitely a number which is higher than the 2015 number. So an exponential growth of interest also regarding the literature of these topics.